I genuinely believe that anyone can be an entrepreneur. Actually, being an entrepreneur is about firstly having a product or service and then building the system around that and training people to be able to execute. Anybody with training can learn how to do that. Most people are in love with the solution, but they're not in love with the problem that they're trying to solve. Absolutely need to be in love with the problem, and then the money will come. No idea is absolutely brand new. So people just need to like be more confident to talk about their ideas. Someone can steal your idea, but they shouldn't be able to steal your passion. If someone can outwork you, then they deserve the idea. It's two things that are gonna like drive your success or not, right? So it's momentum and confidence. And those are the two things that you're always kind of like working against. And not everybody's gonna have the same love that you have for your business. Not everybody could be trusted with responsibility for your business. When you're employing people, the one thing you wanna make sure is I have very successful people around me, and the people that like super successful, what I realized quite early is they're not addicted to being the best leader per se. They're addicted to.
You're not defined by where you come from.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big message that I always want to tell people. Like
you have to be able to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
When you grow up in ends, you don't realize it when you're confident, but you have an audacity to do things that ordinarily most people wouldn't be willing to do.
Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I'm your host, Atto. We got special guest, Dwain Reid, who is an entrepreneur with over 20 years experience, who has worked with over 10,000 founders. He's a former government advisor, and he's also early stage business advisor with the Forbes Family Group. Dwain, how are you doing today?
I'm good. It's a hot sunny day in London, which is different. So yeah, I'm ready to go. Yeah,
same here. Your accolades are amazing, by the way. Do you see how long I was saying all of that stuff? Yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, you're right. It's so warm today. I think it's 27 degrees, and you were saying it's going to get warmer tonight as well.
Warmer this evening, yeah. So and we're going to turn up the temperature on this episode. So.
That's what I love to hear. So obviously I described, you in a few words. Who would you say is Dwain?
Who's Dwain? So I guess firstly, family man. So dad first. We got to start from there, and then alongside that, I like to help entrepreneurs or early stage founders in kind of like growing their business. So I kind of sort of say that like my pillars, if you like, are so where I started. So family, impact, and I guess like connections, or sort of like making connections. So those are called like the three things that I kind of like live by. So business growth consultant, working with especially underrepresented founders and doing that in various ways, as I'm sure that we're going to kind of like talk about through the episode.
Yeah, I love your three pillars, man. Where did you come up with that?
Do you know what? It's crazy because even though I'm talking to clients or whatever, I think you got to actually have some focus somewhere, right? So I always think every year, like, what's the three most important things to me? And I think after doing it like 2 or 3 years, I realized actually these are the main things that I'm about. So what is it that's first always going to be family, right? What do I like doing? Nice stuff, basically. Okay, but in the core of that is impact and kind of like, connections.
Yeah, love that. So let's talk a little about your story. Where are your parents from?
So I always laugh when people say that. So my dad's from Jamaica, and I always say that my mum thinks she's from Jamaica. I've always got to remind her, Mum, you do know you was born in England, right? So all my grandparents are from Jamaica.
Yeah.
So Jamaican heritage, but I was born here. I was born in the UK, lived in the UK all my life.
Okay, whereabouts in the UK were you born?
South London. So
South London as well. Okay,
London.
we love to hear that.
Yeah, and the story probably continues South East London, Peckham actually. So
really? Peckham? Okay, yeah, okay. How had anybody on the podcast from Peckham? Nah, mostly Croydon, Okay, cool. What was it like growing up in Peckham for you?
Do you know what? I guess people like, it becomes your norm, right? So I guess you don't understand certain things are not normal until other people start talking about their growing up and their kind of experiences. So I wouldn't really say that growing up was like overly dramatic, but I probably saw things or were around things that for other people they'd be like, oh my God, you know what I mean? So levels of violence per se. And I guess I was kind of like, I was fortunate enough that I was sort of like I was close to what we would have called back then the boffins or the geeks, but I was also close to the boys that weren't doing, let's just say, so good. But I think that was a size thing. So I'd always think to myself, you know what, like, let me hang around with the bigger boys, because actually if I'm being quite small, if I hang around with the bigger boys, the likelihood of anything happening to me is you know what I mean, is small to none. So
Yeah.
I'd say that kind of thing. So, you know, you're around things you maybe shouldn't be around kind of thing. But otherwise, it's quite what I would call sort of like a relatively standard upbringing, apart from that. So people ask, okay, we spoke about parents, right? So lived with both parents till about 7, 8, 9, then lived with my mum kind of thing. And then that was it kind of thing.
Yeah. So what do you feel like was the drive for you to, because obviously Peckham, people know it's a certain type of area. What was like the drive for you to want to make it out of there, so to speak?
Do you know what it is? I always kind of like look back at, I feel upbringing is important. We could go into like so many different things about why I think that's important. But when I kind of looked at, so if we think about what I said earlier about the paths that you can take, right? So some of my friendship group were maybe doing things we shouldn't be doing, but ultimately I would always remember, oh my God, what would happen if my dad found this out? Does that make sense?
Right,
So I think that kind of kept me on the straight and narrow to a certain extent. And also I was able to sort of like, I guess, navigate around what you would call the bad distraction. So again, if we talk about those two groups that I was actively involved in, right, the good group, the bad group or whatever, I would say for the people that were doing things that weren't so good, they understood that, okay, Dwain can do stuff that's not so good until 4:01 p.m. Then I've got to go and pick up my sister, and you know what I mean? Life continues as normal for me. Does that make sense? So I think the foundations that my parents, mainly my dad maybe, set kind of like kept me around that. So, you have that choice. Like, do you want to, are you going to go down the road of crime, bad stuff, or are you going to try and do stuff and be sensible about it? So I think just wanting to be successful and being honest, knowing that crime's not an option for me, it kind of kept me on that straight, if that makes sense.
Okay, wow, nice. Did you school in the area as well?
Yeah, so primary school, literally in Nunhead, which is just around the corner from Peckham. Then went to St Thomas the Apostle. I've heard another one of your guests.
Yes. I have family members that mad.
So Stack. So I was the last of the Black Blazers. So if you're from like Queen's Road or Peckham, you know that kind of thing. So the Black Blazers stopped with my year group. I think they wanted to retire the Blazer after legends like me.
Yeah, man. That's crazy. So what were you like in school? Were you really into it or not? Because obviously you talked a little bit about wanting to be successful.
Yeah. So let's just say if we stop at like, not stop, but if we start with secondary school, so my GCSEs were all right. So I think I got like 5. Let me not exaggerate. I want to say I got like 4 or 5 A's, 1 A star, and I think like 2 C's or something like that. Do you know what I mean? My GCSEs were good, and I think again, if we go back to foundations, I feel like my dad was quite disciplinarian when it comes to at least that age of schooling anyway. So got me through school, and I always kind of look back and think to myself, well, I think going to college, I did like the A levels that I did. So I went St Francis Xavier, which is in Clapham. So the A levels that I did, I think due to my sort of like, I think because of the disciplinarian attitude of my dad, I was probably getting through secondary school just, again, because of fear, if that makes any sense, right?
Yeah.
So I don't want to go wrong, blah, blah, blah. That kept me on the straight and narrow. But I feel like once my dad got me through secondary school, my parents actually got me through secondary school, there was a little bit of like, you can do it yourself now, which was probably the wrong way to do it kind of thing. Because I found college quite hard, to see what I was doing. I did A levels in, what was it, maths, computing, I can't remember the third one, but like quite academic subjects, right? So I think at that level, I realised from that perspective of academia, that wasn't for me. And I think that's the first stage where I sort of thought of, oh my God, like if I can't do it, if I'm not going to be a lawyer and stuff like that, and no crime, is there any other way that I could probably get through? And I think that's where I started to be introduced to this world of business and entrepreneurship, because I ended up like, as the story goes, and again, we can go into as much detail as you want. You can ask me what you want, but my college story to me is funny as well. It's not funny like at that age, but I was basically a truant from college, but a truant in the canteen. Right, so I'm getting ready, going to college, not going to lessons, but chilling. Now looking back at that, I'm like, what the hell was I doing? I've gone all the way to Clapham not to even go to my lessons. So anyway, because of that, first year A levels, St Francis Xavier, they maybe are, I don't know if they are still now, they were very strict on attendance, right? So I think you had to get something like 85% attendance or whatever as a minimum. So I was getting like 70%, but even though I say I was doing good A levels or whatever, my academic grades and stuff like that, they were okay. They weren't great, but they were okay, right? So I literally remember having the debate with the head of year. I'm like, yeah, but my grades are, let's just say they were about 70%, which would be a pass, right? So they're about 70%. So I'm like, yeah, but why do I need to? All I'm showing you is I don't need to come to lessons and I can still pass. So I was trying to like gift of the gab to kind of get through. Anyway, I think I got like a 3 month, like if you fix up in 3 months, you'll be okay didn't fix up in 3 months, still chilling in the canteen. Because what you got to remember, this is my excuse anyway. I've come from an all-boys school.
Yeah.
Right? St. Thomas the Apostle was an all-boys school. So now I'm going to a sixth form that's mixed. I was trying to learn other stuff that I shouldn't have been learning, right? So anyway, 3 months, didn't fix up. Basically got told like I have to leave the college, so leave college completely, or sixth form college, or I could change my course.
Yeah.
And again, I was thinking to myself at that age, how am I going to go and tell my parents like I got kicked out of college? Because remember, as far as my mum knows, I'm going to college, which I was. I was going to college every day, like literally.
Going to college.
I was going to college. Just going to the class. I was in the canteen. So anyway, the options were leave or I could do a BTEC, right? So I went through the BTEC subjects. There's only one that would have been interesting. That was business and entrepreneurship, I think it was called, or business and finance, or business, something like that. But it had an entrepreneurial thing to it. So again, my college story ended up doing the business and finance BTEC, and that's what started to get me early interest into like business. That was like about 18. And I guess the rest kind of like followed from there.
Okay, wow. So you had a little bit of a roundabout into business.
Yep.
Wow. Was there anybody in your family doing business at all, or was that like your first actual experience into it?
Yeah, first actual experience of no one that I could remember like as a role model, if you like, was doing business. And again, if you go back then, like if I was looking up to someone that I'd relate to that was doing business, I don't really think there was anyone. So thinking of entrepreneurship back then, I think like the role models were mine anyway. So obviously the common Richard Branson, right? And also David Gold, because David Gold was an entrepreneur, but he owned West Ham. So because I liked football, I was like, oh, wow, this guy, like, it's not just a business, so he's not just a football club owner, he's also doing this thing called entrepreneurship, right?
Yeah.
So David Gold's biography was one of the first autobiographical books that I read, sort of thing. And then that, again, long story, but that introduced me to Jacqueline Gold, who's the founder of Ann Summers. Okay, she passed away now, so rest in peace, Jacqueline Gold, yeah. And then I ended up meeting her and stuff like that. So yeah, so I guess that was my early intro and interest into the business world.
Wow. Okay, cool. So let's circle back a little bit, right? So obviously your upbringing, what are some of like the principles that you feel like you learned from your parents? You mentioned a few, you know.
Good question. So, all right, when I speak about family, right, like I think that's from my dad. I think like family, my dad's like a real kind of like family man, like making sure that, you know, family's important and that we know. I think from my mum, it's probably the other side. It's like that responsibility and kind of like both parents like doing the right thing. I think the things that have really kind of like, I guess like are stuck with me is like both of them sort of drilled in this kind of thinking, the feeling of or message of just be a good person, if that makes any sense. And I think I've always tried to live by that. Do you know what I mean? Like I get quite uncomfortable, if you like, if like there's a situation where I guess my principles are, I guess, being challenged, or if something's going to be awkward to the stage of, you know, we could end up falling out over this. Do you know what I mean? I always try to avoid those kind of things. But I think everyone, you know, how you are and how you treat people, to me, is extremely important. So when I go back through life, people might put it in the comments, but I don't think I've fallen out with anyone to a crazy extent, which is a good thing. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So I think that definitely kind of just being a good person, and, you know, my dad, like, you know, the importance of family. So even I don't have brothers, right? I got 3 younger sisters. So I think that my friends, my close friends, male friends, like very quickly, maybe because I didn't have brothers, they felt like, or still feel like brothers to me. Does that make sense? So that whole family unit, like very, very important.
Wow. I love that. Okay, so let's talk about your first business. What was the first business that you started, and when did you start that? Was it during college?
Yeah, so it's funny, right? Because when we talk about business, everyone only talks about like the ones that were successful. Like,
yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
that is very true. Yeah.
So I guess like the first business per se that I started. All right, so let's go 2 before we probably get to the main one. So first one I tried to start was in shortly after college. I won't be able to tell you the age, but maybe 2019-ish or whatever. I tried to set up a business consultancy, more or less. I wouldn't have called it that then. I wouldn't have known what it meant, right? But I tried to set up a business consultancy. But of course, what I always say to people, how can you set up as a business coach or consultancy if you don't know, you know what I mean? If you have never run a business, you'll say, it doesn't make any sense.
Thank
right?
you for saying that.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense or whatever. So let's just say that was my first failed business. It didn't go much far, but you get my point. Second business, I tried to set up something with a close friend, something called what we called DN Entertainment, right? So Dwain, I won't say his name just in case he doesn't want, but DN Entertainment. So what that was meant to be is that was meant to be like an entertainments business or consultancy that would do events that was targeted at underrepresented individuals. So we went to like a couple of business courses, and we kind of like done the basic stuff, you know, like business cards. I think I sent out some introductory emails to people that we thought would be our suppliers or supporters. So DN Entertainment, that didn't go far. But again, that has to do with like probably lack of planning or not really understanding sort of thing. So those were my first two goes, if you like, at starting a business. Then I feel like I went a little bit of a way trying to not quite knowing that I wanted to be a business person, right, or entrepreneur, let's call it, but not quite having an idea that I felt would like, I don't know, I should start. I think I was always looking for like this big grand idea. Anyway, fast forward like a few months, and what happened was I met, I'd call them friends, I'd even call them family now, but like I met two, who became my business partners, and they were thinking of starting a childcare business. So with that, what then happened is I was giving them advice, this business consultant that I thought I was,
Okay.
right? So I was giving them advice, and then what ended up happening is they're saying, hold on a minute, you know so much about business, we know about childcare, why don't we just put our minds together? And that was more or less kind of like my involvement in the first business.
Ah, so that's
Or
how it
third
started.
business, but we're going to call
Okay.
it first.
Okay, so that's how you got into the childcare
100%,
business.
yeah.
And how long have you been doing that for?
So
childcare business
the
for?
childcare business started in 2002. So that's like 22. That was 22 years ago. Yeah.
What was it like back then, like childcare? Because I don't know much about it. It's not really my industry, but you know, childcare is expensive.
Yeah. Do you know what? Like, I don't think it's much different now, to be honest with you. But it's a difficult one because the business model of a childcare business is different from the stereotypical, especially because of the amount of staff that you need, right? So giving examples, obviously, I'm a bit away from the actual numbers now, so this might be a little bit wrong. But for instance, if you've got a nursery and you've got a baby, right, under 6 months, I think it is, right, that baby needs 1-to-1 care. So if you think about that in consideration to a McDonald's, for example, like one staff member can handle like 20 people, exaggerate slightly, but you get my point, right? So people don't understand those basic numbers when it comes to childcare. Like even if you're thinking about like a 8-year-old, for example, like there's certain ratios that you've got to be within with your staff. Does that make sense? So that's what drives up the costs, right? So that's why it's so expensive. So going back answering your question kind of thing, what was childcare like? Do you know what? I think even then we kind of realized that people are always going to need childcare, so it seemed like a sensible business to start, and it was as it worked out.
Okay, cool. And you managed to grow that business to 6 figures. How, what were the steps that you took to grow it to that? That's quite significant.
Do you know what it is? Like the main thing to, I guess, be transparent about is we might have written a business plan, and our business plan would have said something like within 7 years we'd all be millionaires. Okay, I remember.
That was a business.
Yeah, I remember the business plan, like and like getting this business plan clear. So I joke about it when I'm running workshops. There were 3 things in this business plan that I distinctly remember. Right, so 5-6 year mark, we were all multi-millionaires. Okay, great. All right. So this would have been what we started in 2002. This was big by 2007. Because we were doing very successfully financially, we had planned, obviously, if anyone knows Canary Wharf, they'll know the buildings in Canary Wharf, right? Mm-hmm. So we said that we'd have one of those buildings. So think about the Barclays building, right? Yeah. That would be the Giggles headquarters or whatever. And we'd have like a, in the sky, like, like Batman, like the bat light. So we'd say our logo would be going across London. All right. And the third thing, because I was like ultra successful, in my ego self, I'd be like, yeah, I'd have a wife like Beyonce or Rihanna. So that wasn't in my business plan, but it was definitely in my thoughts. All right. So maybe I got 1 out of 3. My partner would say definitely, there was 1 out of 3 that you succeeded with. So in terms of 6 figures, let's go back to plan, right? And you said, how did we get there? Like, we've got to be transparent. It wasn't about our business plan. All right. And I think that's one of the mistakes that a lot of founders maybe, or maybe coaches or teachers of business, they say like, you desperately need a business plan or what have you. You do need a plan, but our success was nothing to do with our business plan. Our success was really more about, 1, staying in the game. Okay, absolutely staying in the game. Yeah. That's quite important. 2, again, if we simplify, but we might build on some of these things as we're going through, but if we simplify, understanding our customer. Mm-hmm. Okay, and understanding our customer almost happened by accident. Let me be honest with you. Now, it would have been definitely I'm not saying this, I don't want to exaggerate, but like at one point we would have been like, all right, let's survey our customers and make sure that we're giving them what they want, right? Because we were thinking about at that stage upping our prices, to be honest with you. But so we were trying to ask them, well, what do they want? So we can give them more of what they're already getting or what they want. One of the bits of feedback that kept on coming back was that, because we asked the question of why do you choose our childcare business? And what we was thinking was going to come back is because it was a cost decision, right? So we had deliberately priced ourselves as, to be fair, one of the lower priced childcare operators in that area. Okay. What kept on coming back was, we choose you because we feel our children are safe, right, at your club. Now, it might sound stupid me saying it, and people might be listening thinking, yeah, but that's obvious or whatever. But it wasn't obvious to us, if that makes sense. That wasn't the language we were speaking to our customers, all right? As soon as those results came back, we started changing our marketing basically to target that safety element. Hey, leave your children with us. It's a very safe place, blah, blah, blah. We got parents putting that in thing. And that almost like 4x'd our business, I won't say overnight, but very quickly. All right. So that's, again, going back to my point. It was understanding our customers, or beginning to understand our customers and what they wanted, etc. Now, when I coach and when I speak to like clients about this, it seems like obvious. You know what I mean, I'm like, no, know your customers. But at the beginning, we definitely didn't. It was a bit trial and error. And I think the third thing is like business model, right? And understanding where the money's at, to be honest with you, right? So when we started out, we definitely thought that our customer was parents of 4 to 11-year-olds, right? So parents of primary school children. But actually, our biggest customer ended up being the local borough. Right. So you talk about that journey to 6 figures, like the biggest change in our bottom line was the borough becoming our customer. All right. So we were running services for them. We were looking after what they would call sort of like their children in need. They looked after children. Sorry, that was it. So looked after children. So if you think about like our business, like I won't say, well, I will, I don't mind. I'll just be transparent, right? So this is back then. This is like 20 years ago, right? We were charging roughly about £10 a day, right, for a parent, right? We had at our peak, we had about 140 across 3 sites. We had about 140 kids or parents of children. The government were paying us, so remember we're charging £10 a day, the government were paying us like £35 a day for, more or less the same thing, right? So then when we changed the model around, it was making sure that the borough was our biggest, was a big client to us. So that was the 3 things really. So knowing our customer, staying in the game, and understanding where the most money would come from.
Yeah. Wow. That's incredible. I mean, I don't understand the government thing. So the government thing, is that people who, I don't want to say benefits. Is it just people that needed support?
Completely the other way around from benefits. So B. Okay, so remember your borough will always know the children that are most in need. Okay, so that might be children with special needs. That might be children that are in the care system, etc., etc., etc. Right. So they would definitely class those children, understandably, as the children with the most needs. Okay, or the most needs for support from a service. Right. So what then happens is the borough's got more money per child than parents, right? So then they're willing to pay whatever the cost of that service is, and to them it was around £30 per day.
Interesting. Were you doing that full time for the whole 20 years?
Good question. So the dream of the business was to have an all-encompassing childcare service, right? So what that might look like is having some level of before school activity, a nursery, after school club, babysitting, what we would call a walk-in bus service, which means you'd go to a parent's house or carer's house, pick the child up, bring them to school or whatever. So that would be the dream. Oh, and then and a holiday scheme type kind of setting, right? So that would be the all-encompassing service. Now, it just worked out that throughout the years, we never had everything at the same time, if that makes any sense. So at certain points, it was just an after-school club. At certain points, it was after-school club and holiday scheme. At the early days, it was a nursery and after-school club. Does that make sense? So ultimately, it didn't end up being, it only ended up being full-time for the beginning stages until it was just after-school and holiday scheme activity.
Wow. How did you manage that? That's a lot of change just happening. Like, it seems like do you know what?
So
activities.
I think, again, when I'm talking to founders or whatever, the important thing is to remember that you're supposed to be creating a system, right, that can run itself.
Right.
So I was fortunate enough to not be in the day-to-day. I was just doing the strategy. Right. So my job really was to make sure that things were running. Okay. So again, at its heights, I think we had a staff of like 20, doesn't sound a lot right now, but 25 staff across the 3 sites. So it's managing the staff, making sure. I guess the ambition would be like, you want it to be, you want it to be national, really. Do you know what I mean? That was just a local kind of operation. But so it's the team and the staff, and at different times, my co-founders were involved in the literally day-to-day operation, but I was never.
Yeah. So how, like, 20 years is a long time, by the way, and I feel like in this day and age, a lot of people don't have that staying power. to be honest, right? So how did you stay consistent? What did you learn about yourself?
There's challenges with like businesses, no matter what business it is, right? So I think that it sounds a bit like corny, right? But again, going back to that original point of understanding customer and understanding that like it's easier to get more money from your existing customer than it is to absolutely find new customers, okay, from scratch, right? So within Giggles, we try to kind of like implement that. How can we get more money from the customers that we already have? And when you say kind of like, what did I learn
About yourself?
Yeah, what did I learn about myself? So as much as, like I said, we didn't get to like that national business that I would have loved to have got to, I think from the successes that we got, it's that whole thing of I started to understand that anything is actually possible. Do you know what I mean? With a few tweaks, with like consistency and stuff like that, like anything's possible. Entrepreneurship is a thing that, again, sounds corny, and I think we might talk about this a little bit later. But I genuinely believe that anyone can be an entrepreneur. Again, we can build on that a little bit later. But so that taught me that. So before that point, and I guess before getting the childcare business to a level of success, I may have doubted whether or not that could have been a thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
But obviously, once you've done it, you're just like, oh, okay, cool. Like it's possible.
Yeah.
Right. That probably would be the thing, kind of thing. And I think also as a kind of like byproduct, I then sort of like realized that this is going to sound crazy, but you'll get my point because thinking of the situation. So I said I wasn't involved in the day-to-day operation, which I wasn't, right? But I would visit the club to sort of like train, motivate staff, and just make sure that things are going okay, right? So looking back, and I realized it quite quickly, like those days when I was in the club, and remember you're with like 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, those were probably the funnest times that I was having. Does that make sense? And it started to make me to realize that it's quite important that as adults and stuff like that, like we don't take ourselves too seriously.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, and it was a weird way to learn it, but like looking back at the year, I'd be like, oh my God, what was the fun time? I'd be going on holidays and stuff like that. But it'd be like that moment in the club where that 6-year-old was just being honest. Do you know what I'm saying? Or you go and speak to them about like staff. I'm spying on the staff, and they'll just say the children that we're looking after. They'll just say wild stuff, obviously because they're kids, right? So yeah, that learnt me, like, you know, you got to keep fun. You got to keep, like, you can't take life too seriously, sort of thing. So that's probably what I learnt from those early experiences.
Yeah, I love that. I absolutely love that. And you know what? I the reason why I'm banging on about the 20 is because it's a long time. Honestly,
I know some people
don't do stuff for even 2 years.
Yeah, some people probably look at the pod hopefully saying, oh my God, you've been doing stuff for 20 years, Coco. But
that's a long time. It's a lot of experience and, you know, it shows, right? Like, honestly. So, okay, let's talk about some of the challenges, right? What were some of the challenges that you faced and how were you able to overcome them?
Yeah, good question. The one that always comes to mind, right, is employing staff, right? Okay. So we came to, again, I'm not even going to pretend that it was like, super planned out, but it came to a point where we knew there was enough money in the bank where we could start building the team, right? So because of my natural, remember I told you, right? So I grew up and I had the good guys and the not so good guys or what have you. So when I could employ staff, I then started to literally automatically think it was now my time to sort of like give back to anybody. Does that make sense? So we all grow up realizing that, I don't know, someone's been to prison, maybe they don't get chances, etc., etc. Someone's black, they might not get chances, etc., etc., etc. So when we were able to employ staff, quite literally, we were almost given a job to anybody that came through the door. Like literally, like, again, sounds wild, but are they black? Have they had a little bit of trouble in their life? Okay, great. We can change their lives around. Okay. And I guess what that taught me quickly is a couple of things, right? Like, not everybody's going to have the same love that you have for your business. Okay, so not everybody could be trusted with responsibility for your business. All right, and there are a certain type of people that are going to behave a certain type of way just because of their background and stuff like that. So I guess I had to quickly realize I can't save everybody. Does that make sense? I haven't got those skills or what have you. So I maybe just need to employ good childcare professionals with good experience to make my life a little bit easier. All right. So that was maybe not lesson number one, but it was one of the big lessons, right? It was like, look, you know, you're running a professional thing and everybody should be professional. And, you know, there's a place, there's a place for certain people, if you like. So as the lesson, what I'd say to people is when you're employing people, the one thing you want to make sure is their value systems match with yours. Okay, so important. I would always ask people, like, for example, no matter what business I'm employing you for, so childcare, for example, I'd say to them, okay, well, what do you think? What's your most important thing in relation to childcare or whatever the business would be? And in their answer, they're supposed to say some of the things that align with your own values, your personal values. And if they don't, to be honest with you, you shouldn't employ them.
Yeah.
Right. Because you want people to have an alignment with values, sort of thing. So again, just, that was number one. Number two, money, to be honest with you, finances, right? So even me, I'm still not great at it, right? But I would say that a lack of respect for finance or cash flow, let's call it cash flow, could lead you into muddy waters like very, very quickly. All right. So I still remember like sleepless nights where we knew we couldn't pay staff, to be honest with you, at the early days.
Mad.
Yeah, at the early days. So we're kind of like borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, etc., etc. But we should never have been in that situation. All right. We should have always, even if that was going to be the case, we should have known. Does that make sense? Whereas we were, again, I joke about it in workshops, but we were literally planning our business based on how much money was in the like literal cash point card, right? So we'd go to the bank or the cash point day before payday and see what the balance was. That sounds crazy now. That sounds crazy now. Do you know what I mean? But
God.
This is years ago, all right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so the respect for cash flow, and especially if you need to pay people, does that make sense? So yeah, every time, like anyone that has the responsibility for especially employing people, right? Like, but even from day one, cash flow is king, like as they always say, kind of thing. So making sure that you're on top of that, you're pre-planning, etc., etc. So that'd be number two. And I guess number three would really be about like founding team, if you like. So I think it's very, very important, like when you're starting a business, to speak about, I guess, the uncomfortable stuff from the beginning, right? So if you've got a co-founder, it's quite important to say, well, what happens if this all goes wrong? And that's an awkward conversation at the beginning, because you're all thinking, surely if we're going to have a good business, it can't go wrong, if that makes any sense. You're full 100 at the beginning. You're not thinking, oh my God, it could go, but of course it could. All right. So you got to have those awkward conversations, and you got to make sure, I think, periodically that your visions still align. All right. So what is your vision for the business? If you're talking to your co-founders, what is your vision for the business in 10 years, 20 years, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And again, they've all kind of got to align. You got to kind of know where each other are going. So I'd say probably those three things in terms of like running a business, probably the three kind of like three challenges. So co-founder relationship, not understanding cash, or not respecting cash flow. Yeah,
I feel you on the first one that you mentioned about like, I hear what you're saying in terms of like helping people around.
Big mistake.
That's tough, right? And it's crazy that you said that people don't, let's say, respect your business. It's true.
No, it's crazy.
You find that they don't love it as much as you do.
I swear to you, like, I will never forget the day, right? So I'm not going to mention names, right? So let's just call him Andre, right? So we've employed Andre. So again, because of my background, and it's fine, all right? What my co-founders would do is, if there's problems, especially with guys or whatever, they'll call me and I'd have to deal with it, and deal with it in a professional way, right? Let's be honest, right? So Andre now is consistently late. All right, consistently late. So even me now, I'm just like, oh, I can't bother to deal with it. Give him one more chance. Yeah. All right. So let's just say it's gone out of hand now. Now all the staff are just like, they're not going to respect you if you're just allowing Andre to be late. So I remember I called Andre, right? So I'm like, Andre, man. And this will be the second time. So I called him once, said, look, fix up or whatever. Yeah. He's not fixed up or whatever. So I called him the second time now. So this now is, I now have to show, I got to earn the respect of even my co-founder, let alone the staff team, my co-founders, because that's my responsibility, right? So I called him up, right? Bear in mind, he's late. Of course, I've called him up. I was like, Andre, like this isn't working. And I paraphrase, all right? He's gone something like, yeah, but I don't need this job. Like, I'm doing, I don't think he said what it is, right? He's like, like I'm on the roads. Like, this doesn't even make me half of what I make.
Oh my God.
And I'm just like, what kind of conversation? like, what kind of conversation is this that we're having? Like, bear in mind, remember, I've not looked out for him to give him. He's looked out for us to give him a job. Does that make sense? So yeah, stuff like that. And that was the wildest one, but things like that kind of kept on happening. Do you know what I mean? So people looking at me because I'm there kind of black. Let's just talk, right? I'm black, they're quite young, and they're actually thinking I should give them a chance just because of that. Does that make sense? Yes, it's wild. So we just got to live by the rules, employ people that should be employed.
That actually, on point at the end of the day.
Yeah, 100%.
Wow. Okay. I mean, you're over that now, right?
I don't know.
You find it tough. I
Kind
mean,
of.
I feel like we all find it tough.
Yeah.
I feel you on that. I feel like we, there is that tendency to be like, yeah, you want to give, a brother or sister a chance. Like, I think we just got to call it what it is, right? That's just what it is. But yeah, because the opportunities are not there,
100%.
right?
And don't get me wrong, there's a time and a place in it. And
Yeah.
like I'll say, I'll go back to the important thing. We didn't have the ecosystem. Let's just use Andre as the name, right? We didn't have the ecosystem to support Andre. Does that make sense? Right.
Yeah.
So therefore,
Okay.
we shouldn't put ourselves in that thing. But
Yeah.
if you've got like the ecosystem where you can support someone, like you've got time to like sit with them and like improve their CV quite literally, then I mean, do it if you can. But yeah, we just weren't ready.
Mad. Cool. So why did you end up leaving business?
Again, so I guess going back to the importance of making sure that visions are aligned. All right. So as I said to you, we went from having let's say around 104 parents per day at one stage. Then that wonderful COVID came along, right?
Yeah.
Which no one could have predicted, right? But a few years before COVID, I had sort of like felt that technology was gonna or should play like a bigger part in the business. And my founders, let's just say they had different views, right? And
Okay.
that happens, isn't it? And that's absolutely fine, right? So I think after COVID and sort of like thinking to myself that, again, going back to my principles, like my principles are connections, all right, family, and impact, right? So I started to think to myself, well, is this still kind of like aligned with all of my values? And I just felt that with the time that I was spending on the childcare business and other stuff that were growing that we can again talk about, like my time was better spent elsewhere and there's more value for me elsewhere as well. So
Yeah.
I basically sold my share back to my co-founders.
Okay. Fair. And now, obviously, nowadays you coach people.
Yep.
You mentioned that you're a business growth specialist. You mentioned that you worked with over 10,000 founders as well. How did that part start coming back? Because obviously your first business was you doing consultancy, and now you went back to it. Takes a lot of courage to do.
Yeah, do you know what? So I guess the consulting stuff was always running along on the outside, if that makes any sense. So again, if we rewind the story a little bit to kind of catch up. So when I started Giggles, I realized quite quickly that, or I felt that the support that was around didn't match, I guess, my voice, all right, and what I needed to hear. So back then, and again, it's changed a lot now, the support system changed a lot, but back then, who you was getting business advice from would be your business bank manager. Like that's the person that you go to get business advice, right? And 9 times out of 10, they had never run a business. So all they're really asking you for is metrics that make sense for them to open or continue a bank account. All right. So that's all to do with revenue. And again, this whole business plan document. So I get to the point, right? But I remember literally in one of the meetings with my business bank manager, he had told me that, let's just say they weren't happy with our projections for one of the years. Okay. And I'm quite direct, as you'll learn. So I've basically said to him, okay, cool. So if I just change this number on the spreadsheet, you'll be happy. And he more or less said yes. And I was just like, what is this? You're like, what? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Do you know what I mean? It's a made up number anyway. So you just want me to change the made up number. Like, all right, cool. Done that. He was happy. Anyway, so at that point, I felt that like no one, and again, maybe it's just a chip on my shoulder, but no one could talk to me about business the way I could properly understand it. So I spoke about David Gold, right? So my early interest in business was about football, right? And business and how that kind of linked. So I wish that, for example, he would have started speaking about football and then we could have a bit of an interest. But more importantly, and to the point, like there was no black people that I could speak to about running business, or no young black people that I could speak to about like growing a business or the struggles that I was having. Because remember, there's no internet, there's nothing like that. It's not nowadays. I can just go on Insta and I can put in a certain hashtag or whatever. I can find someone that looks like me. So I said to myself, look, if I can get this childcare business to a good enough standpoint, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and just try and help as many people as I can kind of like get off the ground and get like businesses like started and going. So I'd say probably in about the 5th or 6th year of running Giggles, I started to sort of like set up systems where I could help people kind of like grow their business. So the things were then working alongside each other, if that makes any sense. So at that same time, I was doing a lot of work in colleges and universities to do with like inspiring entrepreneurship. Then I got the gig at Kingston University, where I'm still there now. So running the entrepreneurship program there. So across all that work, like consultancy, running events, doing the gig at Kingston, probably more than 10,000, to be honest with you.
Wow. That's amazing. So talk about some of the things that you do in terms of like helping entrepreneurs.
So it's variety, right? I think like probably the easiest way to get involved in the stuff that I do is through the events that I run for other organizations. Okay. So I do events that are what I'd call one to many. All right. Come along to one of those workshops. So those workshops, depending on sort of like the audience, are mainly going to be around sort of like the challenges of an early stage founder. Okay, so that's going to probably be around sort of like ideation. Okay, how to get idea, or I shouldn't. So ideation would be about, I've got an idea. Okay, what do I do with this idea? Okay, so that's the early stage stuff. All right, then going forward in the journey, again, probably one to many. So if like, we'll move on slightly and come back. But if a client's going to come to me and they're at the ideation stage, I'm probably not going to do any one-to-one work with them. It's probably not that much value. There's loads of workshops out there. Now, there's a sweet intersection where I feel that someone's probably at the more validation stage. So the idea makes sense in their mind. They've kind of constructed what the idea is, but they're trying to find out who their actual customer is. And that's probably the sweet spot for me, whether it be one-to-one or one-to-many. So I guess one of the best things that I can do is work with someone that's got an idea and help them identify who their first target market is, which we would call kind of like validation. So making sure that someone's willing to pay for the product or service that you want to offer, kind of thing. So I can do work with clients one-to-one or group coaching. Like group coaching is quite popular nowadays. So I do a lot of group coaching, or kind of like founders or owners by that time probably, that are what I'd call like that stuck point. Okay, so they might have been running a business quite successfully or what have you, but they just can't get out of that kind of like that sticky middle, all right, where maybe they're doing 5 figures, they want to get to 6 or whatever it might be. So I guess that's kind of like the different ways that I work with entrepreneurs or organizations that work with entrepreneurs.
Yeah, and you've had some, I'll say successful. You've had, I was reading on your website, you've had, quite a few that have raised a large amount of investment, some that have been on Dragon's Den. So I guess my question is, out of the ones that have been successful that you've worked with, what are like the ingredients
good question. Good
to,
question.
enable them to?
Good question. Do you know what? Like, it's interesting. I think the number one thing that kind of like sets the ones that are going to be successful apart from most other people is resilience, but smart resilience. Okay, and that smart could be like defined in so many different ways. That could be just one pod. How do you have smart resilience? That's like an hour and a half. That's probably an hour and a half pod. But I would say like giving some examples, right? So one entrepreneur that was I guess prop tech. It'd be called prop tech now, but this is like 15 odd years ago. He felt that he had a way to improve the way that estate agents work. Okay, and he had done a lot of background research on or should I say like, I'd call it like data gathering for estate agents. So we had like a list of, I don't even want to say the number, but over 100 anyway, I think hundreds of estate agents. And ultimately, because of the list that he had got and the communication that he had with estate agents about his potential solution or prop tech idea, he managed to raise investment literally by having a conversation with an entrepreneur in a pub.
Wow.
All right. And he comes back and says, oh my God, like, guess what? Like, I've got like 20,000 to put into this idea sort of thing. And that's just about like not being afraid to talk about your idea, quite literally. And like, I always say, if you're passionate about solving a problem, like generally speaking, that will win through. Right, lots of people go the other way round. They go kind of like solution first. All right, I've got this. Let's just use your world as an example. Like, oh my God, there's loads of successful pods. Like, I like talking, so I'm just gonna have my own pod. Like, it's not quite. You know, what I mean, you need a bit more than that. Like, what's the audience? So, where are you fitting into that unique thing? So, I think being passionate about a problem and also kind of like being not being shy, bit of a poor word there, but not being confident to talk about your idea as much as you want and or as much as you can, right? Another what I'd call success, grocery delivery service, right? So just when Uber Eats were just when Uber were introducing their Uber Eats business, an entrepreneur that I was working with, he had this idea of setting up an on-demand grocery. Now it sounds like saying it now sounds like, oh my God, like that's Just Eat. They weren't all as popular then. So again, when he was pitching this idea to potential investors, I'd say like he probably got like 20 no's a week, but still continued. Does that make sense? Like with that resilience. And, you know, slowly but surely I started seeing him putting up posters where there shouldn't be posters, almost like fly tipping with posters kind of thing. But again, it's that kind of like cocky confidence and not afraid to talk about the idea. He went on, you know, grew that business. He got bought out recently. So he walked away with like 80K or something like that. So again, like, you know what I mean? Nice little startup. Another entrepreneur. So you won't mind me mentioning him, Christian Facey. I worked with him in his early stages. He runs something called Audio Mob. So Audio Mob is worth like over 100 million. Like it's very, very big kind of like tech company. So what that business does is, you know, the music that sometimes is in games and stuff like that. So he works with organizations to maybe get the music in games and stuff like that. I'm simplifying it completely. But again, like working with Christian at the early stages, like, and this is probably even before the Audio Mob idea, like you can just tell that tenacity that they have kind of thing that you know, I'm just going to get this through. But again, I think it's that smart tenacity. So listening to advice, taking on advice, does that make sense? But still being kind of core to your mission of solving, you know, whatever problem it must be. So I think that is core to, you know, most of those successful entrepreneurs, knowing the problem, tenacity, and not being afraid to talk about your business to as many people as you can.
Yeah, a lot of people are afraid to.
People think
still, yeah.
The joke. Thank you. I'm glad you said that. That's the issue that people have. Oh my God! Like I don't want to. If I talk to anyone, they might steal your ideas. And the worst thing is, like they're talking about usually investors. Imagine investors who just went around stealing ideas, or worse, like people that are coaches or support programs and stuff like that. It doesn't make any sense, kind of thing. And the worst thing is, and I always laugh at it, right? I always say to some people, I'm like, okay, so where did your idea come from? And they'll tell me who they were inspired by. So I'm just like, hold on a minute. Like saying you stealing an idea, like there's contradictions. So no idea is new. No idea is absolutely brand new. So people just need to like be more confident to talk about their ideas. I think someone can steal your idea, but they shouldn't be able to steal your passion. You know, that's the thing that shouldn't be able to be stolen.
Yeah, I completely agree, because at the end of the day, you have to be consistent for your business to drive results. And like you say, if you're not passionate about it, you're probably not going to drive
100%.
results.
Do you know what I mean? Like you should feel like almost not an idiot. I don't want to be disrespectful, but you should feel silly if someone can outwork you. And I'm saying smart work, not just, you know, they work from 9 to 9. That's not quite the thing, right? But if someone can outwork you, then they deserve the idea.
Yeah. So on the other side, what would you say in terms of common mistakes preventing early stage entrepreneurs from, you know, achieving their potential?
So probably a little bit repetitive. So let's not go too much into that, not talking to people. I think that is one of the mistakes, right? So you need to talk to as many people as possible. So keeping this idea to yourself, okay? But going back kind of like through the steps. So not understanding who you are solving a problem for. And what that basically means is you haven't spoken to enough of your potential customers. Like what people should do, if you've got a problem that you're passionate about solving, I don't know, let's just use a wild, like knife crime, for example, like you should then go and speak to like victims of knife crime, organizations that are like trying to help knife crime, etc., etc., etc. And if you speak to them enough, the solution will fall out of your discussions. Okay, you shouldn't be solution led. All right, like explore the problem, and then the solution sometimes falls out of that. Or if not, if you've got a solution, speak to as many as who's going to give you money for it. Right, speak to as many of those people as possible until you find out sort of like the early stages. So in terms of like mistakes, so mistake number 1, not talking to people. Mistake number 2, not validating an idea. Mistake number 3, not being in love with the problem. Most people are in love with the solution, but they're not in love with the problem that they're trying to solve. All right, you absolutely need to be in love with the problem, and then the money will come.
Yeah, I think, like you said, people are in love with the solution. People are in love with the Google searches.
Yes.
They're in love with the YouTubes.
Oh my God. Or, you know, we could go Insta, right? Like everyone jumps on it. Like, I hope you don't mind using your podcast as an example. Like I've looked over some of your episodes, like great. Okay. Like absolutely great. Your content, the way you're good with your interviews and stuff like that. And I think it draws out a lot out of the interviewee. All right. Someone's sitting at home thinking, yeah, I can just set up a podcast.
Trust me, a lot.
It doesn't make sense, right? But they're again, I'm not saying directly you, but they're looking at other podcasters thinking, oh, this is easy.
It's not easy.
It's absolutely
it's
not.
Not easy. I'll tell you now, it's not. It's a lot of work. No, I completely agree. And I do sometimes get those kind of comments, and I do get people say, oh yeah, inspired by the podcast, but it's like what you say, I think it's more inspired by the outcome rather than actual the work that goes
behind the scenes, isn't it? It's probably people probably think it's an overnight success. Like you just woke up and just, you know, started recording it, and it was just successful. Like, yeah.
Oh gosh. Okay, so I wanted to talk about this because in business, right? And I would say I was guilty of this as well. I had a lot of ideas. I still have a lot of ideas, but I didn't action like any of it, right? And there's this famous quote, right, from one of my favorite motivational speaker, and he was saying that the graveyard is the richest place on earth because it is here that you'll find the hopes and dreams that were never fulfilled, right? So we were talking about a lot of people have ideas, but they never actually action it, right? So if you were coaching someone that had an idea, but they lack action, what would you say to them to inspire action?
That's the only thing that's going to make you successful, right? Like taking action. I always say, like, one of my most common things that I say to people is I think that is two things. Generally, obviously, I'm simplifying a lot, right? But two things that are going to like drive your success or not, right? So it's momentum and confidence. And those are the two things that you're always kind of like working against. And the more momentum you have, the more confidence you will have, right? So I always say to people, like, on any given day, you should do the action that you feel gives you a little bit more momentum.
Okay.
All right. And then that momentum is going to give you confidence. And that might not necessarily be about like having, the best strategy per se, but as long as you've got a plan as to what's the most important thing, okay, and what's the most important thing I can change, which is usually trying to speak to customers, okay, or more customers, then do a little bit of action, okay, that will move you closer to, moving forward or talking to more customers kind of thing. Like, ideas are worth nothing, right? And it goes back to kind of what we was talking about a little bit earlier. Like, too many people think you can protect ideas. Okay, I've got this idea. How do I get intellectual property? That's not quite the road, right? Like, yeah, if you've got like a trade, something you can trademark, that's something slightly different. But going back to your question, like, ideas are 10 a penny. We all have ideas, right? Like, we probably weekly, or not, maybe that's a bit, maybe monthly, see an idea that comes out. And you're like, oh, I thought of that.
That's true.
But you didn't take any action. Exactly. But you didn't take any action.
Because you didn't really feel that passionate.
Yeah, you didn't feel that passionate about it. So literally, I say to people, like, success is going to be a direct consequence of the actions that you take.
Yeah, I love that. I love the fact that you said momentum. What was that other part?
Confidence, momentum, and confidence.
Oh man, yeah, those two. I feel like that resonate, but I never thought about it like that. And actually, you're absolutely right, because I feel like it takes so much more energy to restart after you stop.
Yep.
When I think about the podcast, right, like, it's released every Monday. But behind the scenes, if I'm like, okay, I take a week off, sometimes like, oh my God, the mental strain to get back into the mode of, okay, I'm back on the train again. It's so different to being like, okay, let's just another episode next week, another episode next week.
Momentum. And if you keep that momentum, you get confidence.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, cool. So let's talk about barriers, right? Barriers. So we talked about it, obviously, one of the barriers in action, let's say that's one barrier. What other barriers do, entrepreneurs face to either start or even,
all right,
business?
Yeah, good question. All right, let's deal with what are some of the, like, I guess, stereotypical, right? So the stats already say that Black people, especially Black women, for example, right, they find it harder to access finance. All right, so that's kind of, the barrier of like being able to access finance. I think that the challenge around that for me, though, is like, money can be a good thing or a bad thing, right? So again, we just spoke earlier about ideas. Imagine me and you, like, after the pod, we could speak and come up with an idea. Like, I don't know, do you like football?
Yeah.
So we could say, okay, Arsenal fan too. Exactly.
There we go.
It's meant to be, right?
Go, yeah.
So we could literally, once we stop doing this pod, we could come up with an idea related to how do we get Arsenal fans into some level of community, right? Now, imagine we decided to start that with £100, right? Then there's £100 at risk, right? We could also decide to start it with £1 million, right? But the £1 million or the £100, I swear to you, it doesn't make that much difference as to the chances of success.
Yeah.
It just probably means you're going to lose. You're going to either lose £1 million or work out how to use £100 very smartly. All right. So I think access to finance, some people naively think that that's an issue. Okay. I think what people need to work on a little bit more, arguably, is access to network, right? And there are people doing like fantastic things, right? Fantastic things. Like, so if I rewind back to when I started, I said there wasn't anyone that looked like me.
Yeah.
Or that I knew of. Let me just say that I knew of, all right? Whereas now, like I said, you jump on Insta and there's people that are doing fantastic stuff, right? So, we spoke just before the pod about, the fantastic trip to Cannes that's gone on recently, run by Cephas Williams, who's the co-founder of one of the groups that's involved, the founder of one of the groups that's involved in that. He went to, I done some mentoring with him.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you've got loads of people like the UK Black Business Show.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There's loads of access to networks, that are fantastic for us, right? So I don't know, that barrier of kind of like, let's say, access to finance. Yes, finance is great. But if we go back down the thing and the stuff that I said, have you validated an idea? I don't know of any investor, black, white, Chinese, man, woman, that wouldn't invest in an idea that has already been validated.
Yeah.
i.e. I've set up a basic landing page, okay? And what I've got is a few hundred people that sign up to this thing every single month, okay? And they've said that they want the product. They've given me an indication that they want to buy, a little bit like Dropbox, right? So I remember when Dropbox started, right? All Dropbox did at the start was they had on their website, I think it was either download or buy. I can't remember I don't want to lie, right? So it's either download or buy. And you could click on that, but it did nothing. And all they were doing is they were collecting how many people were clicking on it. So then what they did is they went to investors and said, look, XYZ people are clicking on this per day or whatever. This shows that there's some validation. We need your money to make this work.
Yeah.
All right. Even Facebook, right? Facebook, again, the thing about Mark, let's be honest, and his co-founders, they were tech guys in it, or girls or whatever. Do you know what I mean? So they had the inner expertise. And I think sometimes, so you talk about barriers, going back to barriers, sometimes I think that is a barrier where someone's like, I want to set up a tech idea, but they don't have no tech skills. But again, if you work your network and if you understand the importance of team, which is, I think, is another barrier, then you can kind of maybe get over those barriers. So you need to sort of look for, where's this tech expertise that we need? And that sounds brutal to people that maybe it's their idea, maybe splitting this cake. Do you get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. Zero, right?
100%. Like zero is, if you own all the cake, it's still zero, right?
Yeah.
But you might own 50% of a cake that you can build a business that's worth, millions, for example, right? So I think those things are the kind of like major barriers at an early stage. So access to finance, but I kind of counteract that in 2024 with the opportunity that there is. It's never existed, right? Like this before. Team. Okay, so like being able to build a team. I can't remember what the second one that I said now, sorry. But those three things I think were like the most common barriers that I see.
Yeah. So let's hone in on network, right? The importance of that, of course. How do people build up their networks, like from your point of view?
Yeah, do you know what? Again, it goes back to that conversation and not being afraid to talk to people about your ideas, right? And just maybe it sounds easy to some people, but just getting yourself out there.
Yeah.
Like, and even for people that are a little bit like shy, they don't like going to networking events or whatever, this thing called social media has literally changed the game, right? You could almost DM anyone and say, as long as you've got, I always say like, what's in it for the person that you're messaging?
Yeah.
All right. You can almost DM anyone and say, hey, oh my God, like I'm a little bit nervous to come to this event that you're hosting, but maybe we can have a half an hour conversation. So I think it's just that whole kind of getting over, again, momentum, confidence, right? So getting over that confidence barrier to access a wider network, because, it's one of those phrases, isn't it? Your network is your net worth. I truly believe in that.
You truly believe that?
100%. Look, I don't know. I don't know who's cancelled and who's not at the moment. Right? So I've got to be a bit careful of who I mention, but I'm going to do it anyway, right? So Jay-Z and Beyonce, right?
Yeah.
Jay-Z's in a multi-million-pound problem. The network that he has around him, all right, like that probably is not so much of a problem, right? Because with his trusted, background, history and stuff like that, probably borrowing quite a few million would be nothing. Does that make sense? As long as he's got a plan and, he can pay it back or whatever. And I guess people have got to look at themselves and ask themselves that same question, like, how helpful is my network to me? And if you think your network isn't useful to you or helpful to you or valuable to you, you've got the wrong network. And that's not that hard to change. Does that make sense? I always say to people, it's a common phrase, but if you're the smartest person in all of your groups or the most successful person in all of your groups, you're absolutely in the wrong groups. All right. And that's not me saying you should always be in groups that can offer you value in terms of making you more successful, but you must at least have one group like that. Like honestly,
you're
where
not
you're
the
the,
smartest, yeah.
you know, you're far from the smartest. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like you're lucky to be in that room.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Like, and even with me, like, and we're going to probably talk about like my circle, especially Dean or Dean Forbes. Like, even I used to banter with him like back in the day. So we've got a group, right? We've got a really good group. Like, so I'm just going to name them, right? So Dean, Shane, Kevin, and my close friend Lee, right? We're in a group, and the early banter from that group was me just being silly, like millionaires and me. All right, so I set up the group, yeah. So millionaires and me. But what I was saying to them guys is, oh my god, you lot are so inspirational that I'm proud to be, even though they're my friends. You know what I mean? But I'm proud to be in this mini circle, right? And I think literally everybody needs to have circle or circles where they're looking up to the individuals and they can learn and also offer stuff. Do you know what I mean? To those groups of people.
Yeah, I love that. The powerful group.
Big WhatsApp group.
Now, you see, you guys are now the next generation have this to look up to, which is why it's important to have these kind of
100%.
conversations so that people understand that this is possible, and that, you know, even yourself. I think you were. I don't know if you spoke at. Did you speak at Black Business Show last week?
Not last year. Yeah.
Just like that, right?
Yeah.
If somebody wants to come and speak to you, they've heard in your podcast, they can come and connect.
100%.
Right, it's as easy as that. But people think it's this networking is this mysterious. Oh,
Not at all.
You can. People come up to me all the time. I have a conversation, right? You know, I go and have a conversation with people all the time. I don't know why people put this whole, oh, it's weird, it's scary. Oh, they're gonna say, okay, if they don't want to talk to you, fine, move on to the next person.
Yeah. I think like, again, I'm trying to respect your time on the podcast, but I think it's like it's cultural, right? Because you've got to kind of go back to what messages that we were told as children, right? So one of the common ones, and all children would have got told it, but like especially in the Afro-Caribbean, it's like, don't talk to strangers, right? Or like your business should stay at home kind of thing. Don't take what happens out of home, outside of home kind of thing. So I think like we probably got to unlearn for depending on your age group, right? We've got to unlearn some of the things that we were taught. So if anyone's here is of my age group or just a little bit younger, you can talk to strangers. Absolutely. Sometimes it's good.
Sometimes it's definitely good. Okay, cool. So entrepreneurs, right? That let's say we've got somebody listening right now. They're a bit more advanced in their business. They're generating good money, a little bit like what you were mentioning before, right? But they haven't hit, you know, the 6-figure mark and they're feeling stuck. I guess what are some of the steps that they can take towards, you know, helping them to hit that goal?
Good question. I think usually, again, obviously it's case by case really, but there's two things that's usually playing a part. No, three, sorry. So number one, like I'll say PD, personal development, right? I think usually those people are working way too much in the business rather than on the business, all right? And I think that's usually playing a major part kind of thing. So I think they need to understand that they probably need to invest in themselves a little bit with some personal development, courses, training, getting a coach, okay, that can kind of help them see it from a different perspective, right? Second and third kind of, again, work a little bit hand in hand. So team, right? Like how much are you, so going, it's similar to that working in the business scenario, but like how much are you actually getting from your team? And then there's a major problem if you don't have a team. Like, you know what I'm trying to say? You can't scale without a team, right? So actually your team should be delivering the core business. Does that make sense? And you should actually be out there getting bigger contracts that once you get them, they're actually delivered by your team. Does that make sense? So the biggest sticking point I usually find with those that are successful is linked to team, what I'm just talking about, or systems, all right? And they're all kind of interlinked. So how systemized is your business? Right? Actually, you should be like real successful entrepreneurs. They're not building these sort of like day-to-day operational stuff. They're building systemized businesses. So actually the business can run without them. So the real test as to whether or not you've got an actual business that's good is if you went away for like 2 months, would the revenue go up? Would it stay the same? Or would your business disappear? Do you know what I'm trying to say? And for too many people, even if they're like doing successful in terms of revenue, if they were to go away for 2 months, their business would disappear. You're not running a business. You're just giving yourself another job. Does that make sense?
More like self-employed.
You're
right?
more like self-employed,
yeah.
right? So I think it's that usually those successful businesses or that are in the stick about, they just need help with one, getting more out of the team and how to do that, and two, kind of like systemizing the business, which then goes back to point number one, allows them to work more on the business rather than in the business.
Yeah. Well, okay. I want to talk a little bit about mindset, right? Because I feel like mindset is often overlooked and how important it is. And I think you teased out some of that, right? How important is having a growth mindset to helping you, enable you to obviously if you've got like revenue goals and personal goals, how important is it to have that kind of mindset?
Yeah, very important. And it's probably poor in the way that I might have answered some of your earlier questions, to be honest with you, because I think everything starts with mindset, right? So it's so going back to those 2 points I spoke about, right? Momentum and confidence. Like, you can't do anything if your mind's not right.
Yeah.
All right. So I think having that growth mindset linked with a plan. Okay. So I don't think you need a traditional business plan in the business plan format, but linked to understanding like what's important.
Yeah.
Okay. So again, this is a bit basic, but being basic, like if you've set up an Instagram account, for example, like what metrics are you supposed to be tracking from this Instagram account to make sure that it's, getting what you want, sort of thing. So I think not understanding mindset, and especially growth mindset, like you'll end up going nowhere. All right. But even on the other side of that, all right, and it's sometimes a bit controversial, like like, what's life really about, innit? I think you have to always ask yourself that question. Okay. So for example, with me, like, as I've said, I like nice things. That's one of the three, right? Family, impact, etc. I like nice things. But ultimately, if my family or the impact or the love or whatever I could have on my family was ever in jeopardy, business doesn't matter anymore. Does that make sense? And I think everybody has to have serious questions with themselves and be like, okay, what is really important to me? And I need to keep that in terms of like my value systems in line, right? And why I mention that with mindset is because you can easily fall into this trap of thinking like, oh my God, I got to go 24 hours, like, work hard, no play. And I think even that is the wrong mindset. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, you're trying to achieve certain things from your business, and that kind of plays on like the work-life balance kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Like, so ultimately, like, I love that question of work-life balance. Like who made that up? Like, what is that? Like, no one's ever going to achieve 50% work, 50% whatever the other thing is,
Never,
right?
never.
Everything comes into one. It's just your life, right? So you got to proportion at the time based on what your value systems are. Does that make sense? And again, I think mindset, that is why I've put that in there, is I think mindset is central to all of that. All right. You've got to understand, okay, well, what am I trying to achieve? What's important to me? And, quite simply, how do I get the most out of family? How do I get the most out of business? And I'm going to keep this kind of like positive can-do attitude and growth mindset towards my business. But if anything else is going out of line, I can quickly draw back and put the mind into whatever that thing might be.
Okay. Work-life balance.
The myth.
You know what? You said something that I really like. The fact that you said that it's not about working 24. I often ponder this question all the time. And it's not just business, it's people and careers. I speak to my wife about this. There's some people uber successful, make so many millions. Like, what are you doing all of this for? Why are you still working 24 hours? What is the reason? You already made it. What's going on?
Yeah, I swear it's not that. No, again, goes back to your values. It's not that serious, right? So again, I have very successful people around me, and they all work differently. They all absolutely work differently, all right? And I think the people that are what I'd say uber successful, like super, super, super successful, what I realized quite early is they're not addicted to, I don't know, being the best leader per se. All right, they're addicted to winning.
Okay,
they want to.
I can understand
win.
that.
They absolutely want to win.
Want to be at the top.
They want to win. All right, and that can be good or bad, but ultimately, I guess you got to kind of work out, is that what your addiction is? Does that make sense? And it's okay for that not to be everybody's addiction. You might just want to go on holiday 3 times a year, blah, 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 blah. And slowly you just increase the quality of the holiday. Do you know what I mean? So, I don't know, 3 times a year holiday might be, I don't know, Brighton, York and Leeds. Do you know what I mean? And then each year you're trying to up the quality. Does that make sense? But yeah, you got to work out it goes back to my value systems, right? What is super important to you?
Yeah.
And just drive that. But this whole 24 hours, 7 days a week, just because, I don't know.
Yeah, but people got to ponder it, because I feel like a lot of people just follow other people. They don't think about their value system. So that's why I'm glad that you brought that up, because it's important that actually, like you said, it's not always relevant for you to do 24/7. That doesn't mean there's other avenues to success. It doesn't need to be 24/7.
100%. And then
you know?
what's success, right?
Yeah.
Surely success is
Yeah.
getting out of life the things that you want to get out of
Yeah.
life. Does that make sense? And, we don't, because lots of people attach like money to
Mhm.
success, but you don't want money. You want the freedom, or you can replace that with whatever you want, right? But the freedom that you think that money gives you. So you can probably get the similar level of freedom with the money you have now. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Love it. So Simon's Crib. Do you know Simon's Crib?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah. To be fair, he's big, right? He believes everyone should be an entrepreneur, and that it's a skill that you can learn. What's your opinion on that?
I do think you can, right? I think being an entrepreneur is more about being a leader, if you like, than we kind of attribute to, if that makes sense. Until we don't give enough credit to that. Does that make sense? And I feel everyone can learn leadership skills because, as I said, actually being an entrepreneur is about firstly having a product or service that you can, again, don't take me, you can buy for £1 and sell for £5, right? And then building the system around that and training people to be able to execute.
Yeah.
So you're still buying for £1 and maybe selling or probably buying for less than £1 now and selling probably for a bit more. Does that make sense? And anybody, I believe, with training can learn how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think everybody could be a lawyer, for example.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? But I think like entrepreneurship, I personally think anyone can be it. Because remember, you can be an entrepreneurship or self-employed in almost anything.
Yeah.
See what I'm trying to say? So I definitely think that you can learn how to be an entrepreneur as long as you understand the things of like this again, buying for £1, selling for £5, and then more importantly, building the systems around that and motivating people to carry out those systems.
Yeah. Should everybody be an entrepreneur though?
No.
Okay. So
but I say that from a selfish perspective.
What?
I say that I'm being honest, right? I say it from a selfish perspective because if everybody's an entrepreneur, who's gonna run my market? Who's gonna run my marketing, or who's gonna give like perfect HR advice to people that need HR advice? Like who's gonna save our lives if we need that be? Who's gonna do you know what I mean? So absolutely not. I think everyone's got a place and a and a calling, if you like. All right. I think that like as time goes by, I feel that like entrepreneurship it's like this Hollywood ending sort of thing. Like be an entrepreneur, make lots of money. But if you actually look at who makes the most money, they're probably not entrepreneurs. It's going to be property. It's going to be like, top level CEOs, etc. So yeah. And also like, even like I was reading something the other day, and the most successful, the richest woman in America, or she had done maybe the most amount in a year or something like that, is a lady. She is an entrepreneur, but she runs a glazing business. Is that what I'm saying? Like, do you know so you'd think she runs like a tech business or something. She runs a glazing business. She's run her and her partner, they've run a very successful glazing business for a number of years. Like it's a family business and stuff like that. But do you know what I'm trying to say? Because we get kind of stuck in headlines and, like the unicorn, the literal unicorn, like Facebook or whatever, we all now think that actually if we start a tech business, that's the route out. But her and her husband, they're just like doing double glazing and like renovations, and they're very comfortable.
Honestly, it's always, they say the boring businesses is like the way out, right? Well, nobody wants to do the boring business, right? Everybody wants to get the next Instagram. Okay, cool. So in terms of tips, right, I want to leverage your 20 years of experience, right? Anybody listening to this, they're thinking about starting a business, they're already in their businesses, right? What are 3 tips to help someone today to grow or elevate their business?
Awesome. So maybe put it into a bit of context. Have they started yet?
They've started, yeah. Let's assume they've started, yeah.
All right, so
because you talked about pre-idea as well.
Yeah. So you started your business, you've got it going. So for me, and this is one that's not really spoken about, but I'm going to say it, like, a little bit of an exclusive for you. Go to the economic development department of your borough. Okay, so the economic development department of your borough have money to spend, and especially on people in their borough, right? And better still, if you're listening to this and you're from an underrepresented category, even more chance that they've got some money to spend on you. Now, some of the buzzwords right now are, for example, like net zero. So if your business is around that, then you're kind of laughing, sort of thing. So, but whatever your business is, go to the economic development team of your local borough and say, what do you do to help entrepreneurs in this borough grow their business? I've just started up, etc., etc. They'll give you like loads of kind of like advice and maybe money if you get into the right thing. That would probably be my number one advice to anybody. the help is out there. Like there are so many like organizations. I'm gonna name a few, but I'll probably just miss. So I said UK Black Business Show. Okay, that's number one. If you're a black entrepreneur or underrepresented, I'll say still go there. Barclays do like an accelerator program. Most of the banks do like some sort of accelerator program or support for their cohort. So again, if you're listening to this, because I was a bit biased toward black entrepreneurs, but like Lloyds Bank. Okay, so there's the Black Business Program that Lloyds Bank run. Okay, so again, like reaching out to the networks, the key people of influence that are doing stuff and getting involved in the things that they do. Okay, so there's like an entrepreneur. So sorry to bring up cans again, but there's a guy called BJ that runs Block to Bags, okay, for creative entrepreneurs. So again, these are like key players that are sort of like in the forefront of stuff that's going on, support that's going on. So I just think like reach out to many people. And I think as our like, again, I'm sorry to keep on saying culturally, but culturally we feel like maybe we're begging if we ask people for support. And I think you just need to let that go kind of thing, right? And you need to think if you're in love with, going right back to where I started, if you're in love with solving a particular problem and you're able to articulate that, then actually people will want to help you. Okay, so I think it's just reaching out to as many of your network as possible. So that's number 2. And then number 3, it will always go back to that whole thing of validation, speaking to your customer. Okay, so if you've already started, then speak to customers that you've already kind of given a service or product to and say, why did they come to you? Okay, what is it that they liked about your business and what other services might help them out linked to your product or service? If you haven't got any revenue, speak to who you think your customer could be. And again, speak about the problem that you're trying to solve, how you think they could kind of like support and stuff like that. So those would probably be like quite large, but like that would be the advice that I'd go. And number 4, delegate. Like what can you delegate? Like, are you looking at sites like Fiverr and freelancer.com where you can take advantage of like labor from across the world, like literally across the world? Okay, so for instance, like you might need some graphic design being done. And remember, you might be a startup. So if you're a startup, budgets might be quite tight. So therefore, take advantage of global labor. A graphic designer in Bangladesh is going to be less costly than a graphic designer in the US or in Europe. So like take advantage of that would be my advice, but that would be it. All right. And lastly, I'd be like leads. Okay. What can you do now? Like quite literally. So anyone listening, what can you do now directly? Not like, oh my God, if I speak to 6 people, what can you do now to get more leads for your business? Like, why are you not doing it? Do it kind of thing. That would be the advice.
Yeah. Love that. Thank you so much, Dwain. So much great advice. So obviously you do some work with the Forbes Family Group, right? Talk a little bit about some of those activities, if there's any like programs or events coming up that people can look forward to.
Yeah, Forbes Family Group, like love what we do. So big up Dean, spoke about him earlier, Dean Forbes. He's the 0.1% as he always reminds me in terms of like successful CEO of a unicorn business. So Dean started the Forbes Family Group in order to sort of like, I guess give back, like to put it simply. Now, the things that I do with Forbes Family Group are all about looking at how we can, I guess, provide opportunities for people to be in rooms that they wouldn't necessarily have been open to. So one of the things through things that we run, something called Radar. So we run Radar events where we try to kind of have a good ratio of successful people in the room with people trying to like grow their careers or start or grow businesses. So if we have, let's just say 300 people complete in attendance, of those 300 people, we try and have like 100 like successful people. Do you know what I mean? So it creates a great networking kind of like opportunity and people to meet people. So Radar networking events. We do something called the Cap Table Pitch Competition. So I lead on that. So that's all about entrepreneurship and all about, we spoke earlier about like Black people, especially women, they find it harder to access finance. So just a few months ago, we invested 50,000, so 50,000 across 4 entrepreneurs. So of the winners, all underrepresented founders, so 2 women and 3 women actually, and the guy was definitely from an underrepresented community. So so we do that every year. So I'd say like go on Forbes Family Group and look out for either Radar events or the Cap Table Pitch Competition, but you've probably missed it for this year. But also again, just reach out to me via that if you kind of like need any support.
Yeah, love that. Thank you so much, Dwain. It's been a great conversation with you. I feel like I've learned. I've just been front row. I was like, oh, some of those tips, I'm definitely going to use it for myself. So where can people find you, obviously, if they want to connect with you and reach out?
Good. So I'd probably say I'm getting a little bit better on responding to Instagram. I've been trying to ignore Instagram for years. Like, really, do we need an Instagram? So I say Instagram might be the first good point of call for most people. So my name on Insta is Mr. Dwain Reid. So you probably can see it on the t-shirt. So MrDwainReid. So Mr. Dwain Reid on Instagram, or just my website. Okay. So DwainReid.com. So using my website, again, I'm accessible at the moment. So people should take advantage of that. So on my website, you'll be able to find out a quick way to book a meeting with me or get some coaching on one of the programs that I run.
Yeah, love that. Like I said, love the fact that, you know what we love on the podcast? Transparency and honesty. When people,
Have to be.
when things go wrong, because like I feel like a lot of people like to paint just the good side of a picture. They don't like to talk about the things that went wrong, the ugly side of entrepreneurship. And I feel like you brought a lot of that, and you really brought that experience. It's going to be very valuable to people. So do you have any final words for the watchers and listeners?
Do you know what? So I'll just probably say final words is, if you are starting a business, like, I think in terms of like businesses not being successful, it goes back to that a lot of entrepreneurs are solo entrepreneurs. So get yourself out there. As I've said to you, there are so many networks. So don't fall into that trap of thinking, not to exaggerate, but woe is me. All right. The problems that you're suffering, probably everybody has suffered the same problems. And, you know, that bout of confidence, even me, sometimes I wake up and think, oh, should I be doing this? Does that make sense? Right. So if you are running a business, there's lots of support out there, and immerse yourself in networks where people can share, like you said, the bad side of entrepreneurship, because that's, to be honest with you, most days. Okay. Most days you're firefighting, and that's okay. All right. You just need to build systems around it and get the help that's already out there.
Thank you so much, Dwayne. Really appreciate featuring on the podcast. Maybe in a year we'll talk. Let's see if things change. Let's see if we can have another conversation. Really, really appreciate your experience, your expertise, and, just taking the time to just share with us. Thank you so much.
I appreciate you.
Appreciate you tuning into this episode of the podcast, and we'll see you next week's episode.